pressure that was put at that point in time. Just your reaction to this decision now by the government to allow burials for Muslims who obviously passed away with COVID-19.
Sure. Bismillah ar-Rahman ar-Rahim. So, brother, I just wanted to give your listeners a little bit of further reality in terms of the recent statement by the Prime Minister Mahinda Rajapaksa. So, basically, earlier this week on Wednesday, in response to a question from an opposition member about the country allowing the burial of COVID-19 victims, the Sri Lankan Prime Minister Mahinda Rajapaksa gave a very vague response, the fact that the government would allow burials now, but he didn't give any timeline, no kind of time in terms of when this would be implemented at all, when the ban would be officially lifted. In Sri Lanka, for burials to be allowed, the Director General of the health services in the country has to basically issue a gazette notification to reverse the previous decision in terms of not allowing burials. And the Sri Lankan media, having contacted the health ministry in the country, the health ministry basically said that they haven't received any such instruction yet. And in addition to this, a senior health official in the health ministry said that the first time that they heard about it was during the parliamentary session. According to the Sri Lankan media, they also said that a senior government official said there's been no discussion within government recently with regards to changing this cremation policy. And even just yesterday in the Sri Lankan parliament, the acting health minister, he said that this matter of burials and changing this policy is a matter which the so-called pseudo-expert committee in Sri Lanka, which refused to allow burials, that they should decide and not the Prime Minister. So really what we see, it's been going on now for actually months, is this game that's being played in the country, where it seems as if the government, because of the, like you mentioned, the international outcry and the international anger towards this absurd Islamophobic cremation policy, the government is trying to quell some kind of, to quell this anger, both nationally and internationally, towards this policy. At the moment, there's nothing concrete. At the moment, it seems like a game that the government, the regime, this anti-Muslim regime, Sri Lankan Buddhist, the Sinhalese Buddhist extremist regime is playing, trying to play to the sentiments of the international community.
Yes, Dr. Nazreen. So at this point in time, what you are saying is it's premature at this point in
Absolutely.
time, and we cannot accept that as a fact.
Exactly, that's right. I mean, the Sri Lankan Prime Minister has been claiming that he wants to facilitate burials in particular parts of the country now for a number of months, but the health minister and the president have been dead against this. So it's a game that they're playing, and the Muslims in the country, really, they have no trust in this regime, obviously, and they are not taking nothing for granted in terms of these empty so-called assurances that Rajapaksa is giving, to the people.
Dr. Nazreen, as the situation stands right now, do you have any knowledge of cremation still taking place?
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, the media has reported between 150 and 200 Muslims that have been cremated over the last 10 months in the country. The bodies have been piling up in the morgue because Muslims have refused to take responsibility for any of this. They refuse to, and you can't imagine what these Muslims are going through, where they've already lost their loved ones and they've been unable to be with them as well, with COVID, be with them because of isolation in their last moments. And in addition to that, they're not allowed to bury them, and their bodies, Muslims, have been piling up in the morgue as a result of that. So really very sad situation that's still affecting, the Muslim community there now.
Dr. Nazreen, we know, and obviously, you come from that medical background. And just to look at the argument and the Sri Lankan government saying that this pandemic poses challenges to public health, particularly when people pass away. And I know this has been a debate. It's been a debate in South Africa, and I suppose it is being debated right across the entire world in terms of this pandemic and what sort of public health challenges would it pose in the event of a person dying or passing away.
So there's absolutely no scientific, no grounded scientific or medical evidence that burial of COVID-19 victims pose any health threat to the public. In fact, in Sri Lanka itself, the Sri Lankan Medical Association, a group of doctors, renowned doctors in the country, said that people could either bury without any problems. There were no issues. Another expert committee within the country said the same thing. WHO guidelines said the same thing, that you can bury without any kind of danger to public health. And so this is why, as Muslims in the country and internationally, we know very clearly that this policy, this cremation policy, forced cremation of Muslims, has absolutely nothing to do with public health and everything to do with a regime that is weaponizing this pandemic, this virus, in order to further its anti-Islam political agenda within the country, as well as to curry favor within the extremist Buddhist elements of the society, especially the particular influential Buddhist monks who have wield a lot of power in the country. And the government won this the recent election, on the back of this anti-Muslim sentiment. So this is not a public health debate. This is to do with simply exploiting this pandemic to further anti-Muslim, anti-Islam agendas within the country. I think, just coming back to your first question, brother, as well, about, we need to ask the question, why now? Why now would the government announce this so-called backtracking on its cremation policy? I think there's a number of reasons for that. The first issue is maybe the government is feeling the pressure of this international outrage towards what it's done, trying to create the impression that it's willing to change. But also the spotlight has been on Sri Lanka recently, because there's an upcoming session of the United Nations Human Rights Council on the human rights record of the country in the civil war between the Tamils and the Sinhalese. The country is under the spotlight for its abuses during that war and the war crimes, as well as the deteriorating situation of the rights of the people in the country. You have journalists and activists that are disappearing, enforced disappearance, being harassed, being intimidated. This is the reality of the country today. So I don't think this is nothing to do with the government developing a conscience or any kind of change in stance towards the Muslim community. And that's a big if it does implement this reversal on this policy. This is simply, I think, the government trying to prevent the idea of fighting fires on both ends, trying to ward off criticism towards this,
Yes.
towards itself.
Also, Dr. Nasreen, I think you and I, over a period of time and over the years, we've had this discussion in terms of Muslims and drawing Muslims into a particular mindset, into drawing Muslims into a particular ideology and type of thinking. And this obviously reflects in the lifestyle, and this is the lifestyle that they want Muslims to adapt to. And also in death, because when you look at Sri Lanka, for instance, Buddhists normally cremate their people. When one looks at Hindus, they cremate their people. So even in death, they wouldn't be leaving the Muslims alone.
Yeah, that's the thing. I mean, this is just the latest chapter of the persecution that Muslims have faced in the country to try and leave their Islamic beliefs. We see it internationally, we see it in France, we see it in India, we see it in other secular states as well. This pressure for Muslims to leave their Islamic beliefs. And in Sri Lanka, like we discussed last time, vilification of the beliefs, even halal food. There's been a campaign against halal food in the country, boycotts against this, boycotts against Muslim companies, the khimar and the jilbab, the Islamic dress code has been under scrutiny, niqab bans. All of this, we know, is very clearly to try and distance Muslims from their belief and to marginalize them within the society. And it's on two ends. One is absolutely to try and move Muslims away from their belief. Secondly is this secular opportunistic nature of politics within these countries that play communities against each other and incite religious hatred for political gain. And it's a very dangerous game, and it increases, division between people and violence for the sake of political power of those in government. And this is why, as Muslims, we need to really question this system and ask, engaging in this and feeling that we can create any change through this system. Very clear that this is not the case. Muslims have been playing the democratic game in Sri Lanka for decades. They've been the kingmaker, actually, in many of these elections to get particular people into power. What has it brought them? I mean, today Muslims cannot even bury their dead in the country. So what has all of this engagement in the democratic process actually brought them. And really, this is a system where rights are not ingrained. They can be here today and gone tomorrow. It's very important for us as Muslims to appreciate that.
Yes. Now, also, just finally, Dr. Nazreen, when one looks at the persecution of Muslims in Sri Lanka, and we know that this is coming from a section, the Buddhist section, and considering what has taken place in Myanmar and how the Buddhist monks and everybody else who have been persecuting the Rohingya have basically gotten away, and looking at Sri Lanka, the opportunities or the opportunistic nature of these persecutors as far as Sri Lanka goes, and the lessons that they've learned from Myanmar and applying them to Muslims in Sri Lanka.
Actually, the lesson is, from an international community point of view, is that no lessons have been learned from an international point of view in terms of how you respond to these. I mean, in Myanmar, it was a genocide. It was a religious ethnic cleansing. So I think, again, a key lesson for us as Muslims to understand is that bodies such as the United Nations that did nothing when Muslims were being persecuted in Myanmar, they actually did not even protect the Tamils in Sri Lanka during the civil war as well. There were thousands killed. They did nothing there. The United Nations, nothing. They were complicit in the Bosnian War, the Srebrenica massacre. We know this. And nothing in terms of lifting the brutal occupation in Palestine or Kashmir, the genocide in the Uyghur Muslims in Xinjiang, all of this. And again, a big lesson for us as Muslims is that we can no longer put our trust in these bodies, docile, I think, defunct bodies like the United Nations to solve our problems. This is not a neutral body. This is a body that plays to the interest of particular major powers, especially those in the Security Council. What we as Muslims need to defend the rights of Muslims in Sri Lanka and globally, Myanmar globally, is a state and a leadership that really stands for the interests of the Muslims and that will not accept for any Muslim to be intimidated, to be abused in this way. And this is the Islamic leadership of the Khilafah. When we see this in history, I mean, in Sindh, in this area of Asia, we know the example of Muhammad al-Qasim, where he was mobilized by the Khilafah to protect and rescue a few Muslims who were captured by the Indian Hindu king at that time. Today, who will move? Do you think Imran Khan will move? No one will move. Erdogan? No. So we need an Islamic leadership of the Khilafah system that will stand for the rights of the Muslims and defend them, regardless of where they live.
Well, inshallah, we're looking forward to, obviously, we know the month of Rajab is in, and this year, Rajab is significant, 100 years since the fall of the Khilafah. And inshallah, we are planning a webinar, a complete webinar, so that we can comprehensively understand what the fall of the Khilafah has meant in the last 100 years and why the situation we find ourselves in today. But that is going to happen, inshallah, next week sometime. So I'm looking forward to that webinar as well, inshallah. But for now, Dr. Nazreen, as always, Allah accept, Allah reward your efforts, Allah keep you, your family safe as well. And Jazakallah for your time.
You too, brother, inshallah. Jazakallah khair for the opportunity.
Dr. Nazreen Nawaz joining us out of the United Kingdom against the background of the cremation problem that Muslims have faced in Sri Lanka over COVID-19. We're going for a break. We come back. We'll be joined by Semtoa's Siddiq Steenkamp. Sahuk, the press release with regard to the refund of Hujjaj, and this is a response this morning coming through from Semtoa.